Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Google Pixel 2 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, what's really crazy is that I remember when this phone first came out, and I was actually very excited about it. I was very happy about it. The thing I liked a lot about these particular phones at the time were that they were stock Android. They were stock Android, and these were Google's own phones. Google makes Android, they own Android for the most part, and with the Google Pixels, these were their foray into their whole entire phone landscape. This was not the first set of phones they ever made though. As you all know, they made the Nexus lineup. They probably teamed up with some other phone manufacturers before that to make some phones too. I love their Nexus lineup, and their Pixel lineup was also very decent. But this was still the time where the Pixels, or the Google Pixels at that time, had one of the best cameras that you could buy at a phone. And quickly after these phones, I think that's when things started to go down a little bit. But I still like the Google Pixel 2. I still think these phones are still very decent in a lot of different ways. Would I recommend buying them though? Let's talk about that throughout this video. But if you want to buy some phones, I would recommend buying this year. Links will be down in the description. You can get that from there, and you can support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular phones, with the Google Pixel 2, you can clearly see on the front side, definitely a very interesting layout. So you can see, when this phone came out in 2017. So you have to keep that in mind. This was definitely an older styling of phone at the time. There was massively thick bezels around this whole entire phone. You're getting a 5-inch AMOLED display on the front side of this thing. So that is definitely, as you can see, a pretty large, it's a small display. 1080p though, still very decent resolution. But this was definitely a very, very small panel, but it was a decent panel at that time. So it's pretty crazy when you think about it, how smaller phones have gotten since then and how much bigger phones have gotten since then. These phones have gotten massively massive since then, which is pretty wild. And with this particular phone, there's no 60 Hz, it's just 60 Hz, no 90 Hz, no 120 Hz. It's basically a fairly limited panel when it kind of comes down to it. And with these types of devices, I would hate for you to go and buy them and then, just keep them. And then, the panel itself is a very aged thing, but also everything surrounding the bezel. There's massive bezel around it. You are getting the speaker grill, which is a nice touch, but it's a fairly limited type of styling, as you can probably tell. And this in and of itself is another very, very big, I would say, turn off for this type of device. So take it as you will, but definitely the front side of this thing is not the most appealing thing of all time. On the bottom of this phone, you are basically getting a USB Type-C port, which is great. You're getting an aluminum back and aluminum frame, which makes this phone feel pretty good. I've always felt like the Pixel 2 and even the Pixel 3 kind of felt a little cheaper. I'm not really too sure why, but these particular phones, still, they don't feel as good as the current Pixels, but that's perfectly fine. That's kind of what happens over time. You end up getting better and better build quality, and that's exactly what's going on with this particular device too. So from that side, definitely from almost every single angle you can kind of look at it, these particular phones, they weren't terrible, but you can definitely tell they have aged kind of a little bit differently than a lot of phones nowadays. You're getting the fingerprint sensor on the back, a single camera. It's a fairly limited type of camera when it kind of comes down to it too. We'll talk about that in a second. But some major things that this phone is missing out on, that almost every single phone has nowadays, is a 90 Hz or a 120 Hz display. You're missing out on those two things. There's no wireless or reverse wireless charging on this device either. That's another really big thing. You are getting IP certification, but the build quality isn't that great. Nobody really makes phones like this nowadays. So that right there is another kind of a big turnoff. And also on top of that, the price tag of this phone can be kind of deceiving because, you look at this particular device and it doesn't cost that much. You can buy this phone for probably $40 nowadays, or even probably 50 or so, whatever it is. That could kind of make you think that this phone is a good deal. I will tell you, this phone is not really that good of a deal. And this in and of itself is another really, really insane thing going on for this particular device when it comes down to it. So that right there is another very, very, very big thing to kind of keep in mind with this particular phone. So from that particular perspective, that kind of covers it up here. Now, on top of that, with the Google Pixel 2, you are also getting the camera. So this thing has that single 12.2 megapixel camera on the backside. Then you're also getting that 8 megapixel wide angle camera on the front. Now with this particular type of phone, like you would have probably expected, it is a fairly limited type of experience. So at that time when it first came out, it really wasn't that bad. It was a decent camera. It had a lot of stuff that most people probably would have wanted on their type of phone. But for today's standards, it is definitely a lot more of a limited type of experience. For the most part, I would hate for you to go and buy a phone today if it's going to be giving you that type of limited experience. And that is kind of what's going on here. So with the Google Pixel 2, I mean, the thing you have to keep in mind here is that this particular phone is going to be giving you, I mean, as you probably would have expected, I mean, there's 4K 30 on the back and 1080p on the front. As you probably would have expected, as I've mentioned so many times from now, you really need a phone that's going to be giving you an overall better experience in this type of stuff. And that's kind of what's going on here. So with this type of phone, I mean, you're getting a very, very limited type of experience. I mean, inside of social media applications and all those other types of apps, it's definitely going to be not the best experience of all time. It can still take photos and videos, but even honestly, compared to other phones that came out in 2017, like I feel like the Samsung Galaxy S8 has a significantly better camera than this thing. And on top of that, I do feel like the Samsung Galaxy S8 is giving you way more features inside of that camera. Even the iPhone 10, I feel like it's giving you an overall better camera than the Pixel 2. The Pixel 2 quality of that camera was good, but otherwise I do feel like the Galaxy S8 and the iPhone 10 were probably giving you better cameras when it came down to it. But I will say from that side, the biggest advantage for the Pixel at that time wasn't really the fact that this thing was giving you like that crazy great, camera. It was also not only that, but it was also the stock Android experience you're getting on this phone too. Like this phone was basically giving you stock Android. That was a really, really nice thing going on for this particular phone. Like being able to go through and just have stock Android just waiting for you right there was a very, very cool thing. And like this in and of itself was a nice thing going on. I mean, this phone was giving you that and like software updates for a long period of time compared to other phones. That was a very nice thing going on for this particular phone. And that in and of itself, once again, was one of my most favorite features going on for this particular device. And if I were going through and if I were to go through and buy a device, I definitely would have preferred a device like this at that time with stock Android rather than having like a skinned, kind of bloated version of Android like you were getting kind of on the Galaxy S7 and the Galaxy S8 kind of fixed it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, in terms of the performance, this phone at that time was giving you that Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 chipset inside with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, that was basically this best chipset you could get at that moment. So I think that was a nice thing going on here because you could basically just get the a really good device for the most part and not really have to worry about like anything else really that much for the most part. So I do think that was a really nice thing because nowadays with the Tensor chipset, it's a little bit of a different experience. But at that time, you were getting a very, very good performing device with basically good performance all over the place, which was a very, very nice touch going on for this particular phone too. So I will tell you with the performance side, definitely not terrible, and you're still getting a very decent performing phone for a 2017 device. But keep in mind, this was not a good performing device anymore. This phone is very, very limited when it kind of comes down to it from that side as well. The battery life, I mean, this one was giving you a 2700 milliamp hour battery, which at the time, I mean, that was kind of probably the norm for a lot of phones out there. So I couldn't really blame this phone for that. But I mean, it's a very small type of phone. And that, again, is kind of what's going on when you're getting these types of devices. Like these phones just really aren't going to be giving you the greatest type of experience when it comes down to that side either. So I will tell you with the Google Pixel 2, this is one of those phones that I look at and I'm just kind of like, not necessarily the best fan of this particular phone anymore. At the time it was decent and even now it's like not that bad of a phone, but it's just not a phone that I would recommend buying anyone. Don't use it. I wouldn't plan on, buying it for anyone. And it just doesn't make sense to go and purchase it. There's a lot of other phones that I recommend people to buy rather than this phone. Phones like the, Google Pixel 7, the Google Pixel 6, the Samsung Galaxy S22, Samsung Galaxy S21. Those types of devices are going to basically be a lot better than this one, and that's the road I'd recommend going down, is going down that direction rather than going down the Google Pixel 2 route. So take that as you will, but that's kind of how I see this particular phone holding up in 2024. If you have any other thoughts or questions though, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.